Hi, I'm Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdoc. Today, as usual, we have an extraordinary documentary about, rape, culture clash, death threats, life in a culture that most of you who are probably watching this show are not used to and don't know a whole lot about, but we're going to find out in a film called To Kill a Tiger. And I'm going to introduce our guest in just a moment. But I'd like to remind you that we are brought to you in part by Real Screen Magazine. They're having their annual Real Screen Summit this coming January. Go to our website at westdoconline.com. Scroll down to the bottom, click on it. It'll give you registration information. It's a great event. I've been going for 20 years. Also brought to you in part by Riverside.fm, which is the platform we're recording on. And the reason that you can see that the quality of this show is better than most online shows is because of the little magic secret sauce that Riverside has. At the bottom of our website, there's a Riverside logo there. If you click on it and if you subscribe using it, you'll get a discount. Today, To Kill a Tiger is the name of this feature film by Nisha Pahuja. Boy, I messed that up, didn't I? Nisha, how do you pronounce your last name? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Pahuja. Nisha Pahuja.
Yes.
And where are you located as we speak?
In Toronto, Canada.
Well, it's one of my favorite places. I suspected that because I go to Hot Docs almost every year, and Hot Docs is the most amazing festival. It's the largest documentary festival in North America, and it may be the best doc festival in the world because it's a beautiful city. It's a great time of year. It's easy to get around. The people are friendly. And are you a Canadian citizen?
I am, yes.
So the culture in Canada for documentaries is really extraordinary. And I've known about it for a very long time. Actually, when I graduated from college in the last century, I spent the better part of the summer in Montreal at the National Film Board of Canada, actually. And I almost stayed, but that's another story. So To Kill a Tiger, do you want to tell us a little bit about what this film is about and how it got started, please?
Sure, yep. So interestingly, there is an NFB connection. There are co-producers on the project. So To Kill a Tiger was 8 years in the making, and it is, I have to say, this extraordinary, powerful story about a father and his love for his 13-year-old daughter who is a gang rape survivor. And the villagers, of course, want him to marry her to one of the rapists, and the father decides that he is going to fight for justice, supported, of course, by her and his wife. And the film essentially tracks their journey to justice and, sort of documents all of the obstacles that they face, which are huge, sometimes seemingly insurmountable, both exterior and interior. And it's really, I would say the structure of it is really sort of a hero's journey. And essentially that's exactly what he underwent.
So I think let's take a look at the trailer before we get too far. You'll get a feel for how extraordinary and what a wonderful film this is.
ये उधर से आ रहे थे आई उसके बाद मुझे हड़बड़ा के गिर गई तो हम पूछे भी उसको तो कौन किया था
बोल रहा था कि अगर किसी को बताएगी तो मार देंगे बोल के बोल रहा था
तो लड़का या लड़की की कोई तो दो करना नहीं रहे
सजा तो उसको मिलना चाहिए ना जो गलती किया है
काम तो हो ही गया है आप लोग उस विचार को क्या कीजिएगा वो आप जानिए तो विवेक से तो के काम लेना है
आपको खराब लगता है क्या दीदी पुलिस लेके गई था
जान से मार देंगे, केस वापस कर लो नहीं तो।
कायन कभी अगर मार भी दिया तो मेरा बच्चा सबका कहा होगा।
सजा सजा फेरा में नहीं भीतरे चल जाएगा, बता दे रहे इसको, होश है इसको।
हम भी एगो थी बुढ़वा खा, इसलिए उन लोग को बाद में काहे जाएंगे करके।
अब वो नादानी में गलती कर दिया तो क्या करे, उसको काट के फेंक दे।
इसमें अगर उनको न्याय मिलता है ना तो सारी जो वाक्य है ना, सारी जो धारणाएं है ना, वो टूटेगी।
इस केस के दौरान अगर मान लेते हैं उस घटना को आसपास में अगर बंद हो जाए तो एक तो हम सोचेंगे हमारा बेटी की कुर्बानी हो गया उसमें।
How much time have you spent in India, and how well do you know the culture, or can you tell us a little bit more about your background so we have a little better idea of where you might have been coming from when this film was shot?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I am Indian. My family is Indian. So and I was raised obviously in an Indian household. I have been going to India for around 30 years, 25 to 30 years, making documentaries. And I would say this film and the film before this film, which is called The World Before Her, it was also looking at the issue of gender justice and women's rights in India. So that subject is something that I've been deeply immersed in for over a decade. The way I make films, my process is actually really, really immersive. You know, I'm not somebody that kind of parachutes in and then leaves. I take a very, very long time, to the frustration and consternation of all of the people around me, but I do take very, very long to make my films. So it's a really immersive, intensive process. And I mean, obviously, you know, my gaze is the gaze of a Canadian. It is the gaze of a Westerner, because that's really the culture that I grew up in. But I think what sort of distinguishes my films potentially is the sense that they are very non-judgmental, and they really are seeking to understand something and seeking to understand a culture as opposed to defining a culture or judging a culture.
Well, you know what? Part of the magic of this film, for me, as a curious person, is getting inside this culture, seeing this culture which is so foreign, so different, so strange to us in our culture. How, you know, one of the notes in your press notes is that there's, I forget how many rapes every day that happen, and a very, very small percentage are ever reported, and if they're ever prosecuted, only 30% are successful prosecutions. I don't. Is there a way to explain the culture? What happens to this parent, this father of this 13-year-old girl? They go to the police arrest the 3 young men, and then the village where he lives turns against him and his family in a big way and threatens him, and they say something which again is sort of shocking to us, and it's in the trailer, you know, where the woman says, well, she's already had sex with the guy, so she's shamed and ruined, and so she should marry him and forget about the prosecution. How can you explain that culture at all? It's so foreign.
Well, I mean, it's foreign and not foreign, you know, at the same time, right? I mean, that sense of marrying the rapist might be something that is extreme and not practiced in many parts of the world. I mean, it is illegal in India as well, so it's not, you know, it's not legally allowed. But the core, which is misogyny, patriarchy, the sort of looking at women as less than men, that's universal and always has been. And what she goes through and what women around the world go through is it's really a symptom of that. Now, in India, I would say at this point, and it's been building, and there are many, many reasons for it, I would say that there is kind of an epidemic of rape. And that's very, very dangerous, and it's very problematic, and it's deeply, deeply rooted in the idea of son preference, and just a general sense of women and girls being less valuable than boys, and a culture of entitlement that allows men and boys to do what they want with girls and women. You know, that's fundamentally where it comes from.
You know, you would think that the parents of the three boys might have had girls in the family also, and that they might have a little different attitude to protect their own daughters, and that others in the village, half the village is men and women, half are women. I mean, it's so hard to comprehend how that in 2023 or 2020, whenever this was shot, that it's acceptable. Yes, I'm hearing what you're saying, but it's, and I've known about this, and of course everything you've said, is true, but it's still sort of shocking when you see it on the film, isn't it? It's
absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely shocking, and it's very troubling. But after you have spent the amount of time that I have, in a place like India, you actually start to understand the society and the way villages are structured in India, the importance of this sense of community. That's how they survive, right? So, of course, there is deeply, deeply entrenched notions of honor and shame that are hugely problematic and have to be deconstructed and done away with. But there is fundamentally the reason people were putting pressure on him, and there were times when he did. I wouldn't say he almost capitulated, but there were certainly times when he was thinking about
the father you're talking about.
The mother and the father, both of them. She never wavered, but the parents did. And it has to do with your survival. Your survival is rooted in the village, So if you're ostracized, it has a direct impact on your survival, especially when you're that marginalized and that impoverished, right? Those bonds of dependency are so deep and they're so entrenched. And so the fact that he did what he did makes it that much more extraordinary, because it also had to do with just being able to survive.
And my understanding is when you went there originally and you were filming, you weren't making this story. My favorite word in documentary filmmaking is pivot. That you did a pivot. You want to tell me a little bit?
I did a 360, Chuck. It wasn't a pivot. It was a complete rehaul. Yeah, no, it was quite an odyssey, making this film, and part of the reason it took 8 years is because of this really massive pivot, that I did, and we did it actually in the edit room. I mean, we were so determined to make this film that was looking at masculinity in India, and using Ranjit's story and the court case as the spine of this larger kind of piece on masculinity. And we were so convinced that it was the right approach, all of us, like everybody that was part of the creative team. And it was after about 2 years of editing and kind of knocking your head against a wall and thinking, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Of course it's going to work. We've got to do this and we've got to do this. And we finally showed it we were so defeated at one point, and we showed the film to a couple of editors that we really trust. And both of them, within, watching this kind of long assembly, within minutes said, you've got 2 separate films and you need to just focus on the story of Ranjit because it is so powerful and he needs the space, So that's what we did. And then it came together pretty quickly,
What was their reaction, the family, when they've seen the film, I assume?
Yeah. Oh, they loved it. I mean, we had, for years, we were going to not reveal her identity. We weren't going to show her face. Right. For many reasons, legally, that was, as a minor, that's what the law demanded, and just ethically it felt absolutely, like we couldn't show a child. By the time we were finished the edit, though, she was 18. And, you know, we had tried so many different techniques to hide her, to mask her. I don't know if you saw Welcome to Chechnya, but, you know, they literally did like a deep fake, and we were working with the same technical team coming up with this deep fake stuff. And it was all beautiful, but everything felt like we were obliterating her. It just felt ethically wrong. It was just
and
wrong.
Making the shame more shameful in a way by hiding her, right?
That's exactly what it was. Instead of celebrating her,
the culture of shame.
Completely. That's exactly what. So it's like I'm just perpetuating this prejudice that I'm critiquing. You know, it makes no sense to me. So we actually showed the film. We showed a fine cut of the film to the family, and you know, she essentially said, "I'll watch the film and I'll decide whether I want to be seen or not." And they just loved it. They just loved it. And recently we actually did screenings with the family in the UK, and those were just, I cannot tell you how powerful those screenings were. They were so deeply, deeply moving for everyone, you know, for obviously for them and for the audiences. It's quite a beautiful experience.
Do you know what the distribution status is in the States and Canada right now for the film?
Of the film?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the NFB has worldwide distribution rights. So it's, you know, in Canada they're managing things. There's stuff happening in the US, and there's stuff happening internationally, which I cannot talk about just yet. But
is it online in Canada on the National Film Board?
Not yet.
But it
December
will obviously run at some point.
Yeah.
So
December the 5th.
You know, like I said, I was a fan of, you know, going to film school and learning about films. You know, it seemed like half the really great docs that we saw, this was a long time ago, were from the National Film Board of Canada, and they're probably doing just as well, you know, doing great work, but you don't see them as much here in the States as, or at least it feels that way. And I'm just wondering exactly what was the connection to the National Film Board, and are they the same as they were 40 years ago? I mean, they were superstars in the doc world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they obviously still do like great, absolutely, you know, great stuff. What's changed? I would say the overall doc market has changed. You know,
well, that's another story.
Exactly right. So they're, you know, they're obviously part of that larger narrative. With us, I mean, they were our co-producing partner. So they invested.
What does that mean to you? I mean, there was an independent commercial production company and the NFB in partnership?
Correct. Yeah. So my production company and then the National Film Board of Canada, and so they came on board for a substantial portion of the budget. So and just incredible creative support. You know, that's something that they do really, really well, which is foster and nurture filmmakers and filmmaking talent. And they're one of the last. They're really sort of one of the last holdouts in terms of letting filmmakers take their time to make the stories that they want to make. There was no pressure on me. You know, there was nobody coming in while I was going on in the edit room. There was nobody that said, "What are you doing? What are you guys doing? Why is it taking so long?" It was just complete faith and complete trust in the process, and letting us figure out the film and what it needed to be, you know, and taking whatever time we needed to take.
And what was the post process? Can you tell me approximately how much footage you shot, what the shooting ratio was, and how was the editing process?
Yeah. It was amazing editing. It was just it was a beautiful experience editing this film. Well, I shot for 3.5 years because remember I was making a different, you know, I was making a very different film. So I filmed for 3.5 years, probably about 700 or 800 hours of material, maybe more.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then, of course, we were considering archive as well. So we had all this archive. I mean, I cannot tell you what we swam through.
And what do you go over there with? I mean, what kind of a crew? Do you pick up people there? Do you take people with you? What kind of camera? Big, shoulder, small, little camera, or what?
Yeah. So it's actually my husband who shot most of the film. And then there's a sound recordist, a woman named Anita Kushwaha, who's brilliant and who I've worked with for many, many years. So, and the three of us have worked together for many years. So we're a really, we're a team that just knows each other very well, that we have a certain kind of shorthand. We work very effectively together. I know exactly what I'm getting into with them. There are no surprises. We have a lot of fun together, So it was the three of us. Every now and then we had a production assistant. Mrinal shot on the C300, and of course
Canon C300.
The Canon C300, and then we did some drone. He did some drone work, and then the edit was really incredible because I literally worked with two editors, and I started with one, Dave, who's sort of a long-time collaborator. I think he got sort of exhausted, and we decided to switch gears. And then I started working with Mike Munn, who edited Stories We Tell, Sarah Pauli's film. He's a brilliant editor. So I worked with Mike for about 6 or 7 months, and then we brought Dave back, and it was the three of us, sort of in the edit room, working on it together. It was such a beautiful
experience. And then when does, just out of curiosity, is the National Film Board, are you giving them cuts once a month, or at the very end, or they come in, do they give you some notes and say, hey, you should shorten this and lengthen that, or just mazel tov?
Yeah. No, not quite mazel tov. Mazel tov definitely at the end, but not before. So we had deliverables, so rough cut, assembly, fine cut, picture lock, and then final film. So, and of course those dates kept shifting. It was sort of, obviously we tried to stick to a schedule, but it never quite happened. And they would watch various cuts and give us notes, and if we agreed with the feedback, we'd obviously incorporate it. If we didn't, there was no pressure, there was no compunction to do, to sort of follow their suggestions. They were very, very happy to kind of let us guide, but they were obviously contributors.
I get jealous sometimes when I go to hot docs in Canada and I see how supportive the government. I guess it's a two-edged sword, so to speak, because there's an upside and a downside to it. But the Canadian filmmakers seem to have an awful lot more support.
We do in a particular way. I mean, undoubtedly we do. But that, as you said, it's not so simple, right? I mean, I think there's definitely support in terms of making your film, but when you want to get your film out, I think that's where it's really problematic, and that's where it starts to sometimes feel that we get in our own way, that we actually prevent our own success in the international marketplace. Right.
Well, I would think that this film, having obviously seen it, certainly would play on any of the major streamers, especially, I think of Netflix, only because Netflix now has such a variety of foreign to the United States, foreign films with subtitles and everything else, and it certainly would play on Amazon or HBO or Showtime or Hulu or any of them.
Yeah.
It's an amazing drama. I noticed in the film, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you blurred any faces, but in the trailer, I noticed, having just rewatched it, you blurred some of the suspects' faces.
Yes.
What was the thinking behind that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they were out in public, when they were filmed, and I just picked up on that. Yeah,
no, for sure. In the final film, in the film that's going to be released on the 20th of October, they will be blurred. The convicted men will be blurred, and that's because we just found out recently that the case has gone to the High Court. The men have appealed, and the case is now sitting at the High Court. So, because of that, we've had to blur the faces.
So it's being released theatrically in Canada in October?
It was released theatrically in Canada in February. Shortly, it was selected by TIFF to be a Canada's top 10. You know, TIFF every year has a Canada's top 10 list, so it was on the Canada's top 10 list.
Beside the fact that the film is a drama and a mystery in a courtroom and an interesting looking defense attorney, it's being able to parachute in as a viewer inside this culture is such a special privilege, I think.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I agree. I agree. I think that's probably in some sense the power of the film. You know, that you were actually allowed to experience what he's going through and really be on the ground and understand the reality on the ground, you know, and meet all of these people and really follow a narrative from beginning to end. And that, I think, is what's so special, and it's what we as documentary filmmakers crave and are always looking for, right? You're always looking for that story, that incredible story that has an actual beginning, a middle, and an end that you're not constructing. You know, that you're not waiting for things to happen, or things actually just happened. There was just inherent drama in this story. You didn't have to make it up, right? It's like, you know, that sometimes, I mean, that's what I love about documentary, because truth is always stranger than fiction. You cannot make this stuff up. And I think it was a gift, right? Finding this story, finding this family, finding this incredible man who had this courage, and this 13-year-old daughter who's sort of the moral heart of the film and the moral center of the film. You can't write those people up.
And I think, if I recall, because I watched the film a few weeks ago, there was a title at the end, and I don't think this is giving away too much. It said the young girl wanted to be a police officer? Yeah. Is that the same today, or is that different now?
No, that hasn't changed. She definitely still wants to be a police officer. I mean, she's got she's thinking of other things in case that doesn't pan out, but that's definitely something that she wants to do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's your next project?
My next project is finishing the film that I started. You know, it's actually just going back and making the film on masculinity that I started all of this with. So it's because that material is also so incredible. It is so powerful. It's just why we hung on to it for as long as we did, and we couldn't let it go, because it's so strong. And so it's actually just, it'll be finishing that, you know.
How long, when you were making this film, what periods of time did you spend in India? I mean, how many days were you on the ground, so to speak? Months. Months
and months. I would go in and I would be there for months at a time. Absolutely, you know. I wouldn't go for like 10 days or a week. It was just, I was there, right? I was literally, I mean, I would say that I was probably half the time in India and half the time here, right? So I wouldn't, it was a very, very intense, deep kind of deep dive into the place. I was living in Ranchi. I was living in the city where the court was, right? We had a house, and yep, it was pretty living there.
Thank you for being a guest on Westdoc. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you on the show and hear all about your film, and I hope that the film gets wide coverage and ends up where people are going to be able to see it whenever they want.
Yeah.